page 9 on the church house. So Genesis 10, up to 11, verse 9. These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer: Ashkenaz, Ripah, and Havilah. The sons of Japheth: Elisha, Tashish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these, the coastland peoples spread in their lands, each with his own language, by their clans in their nations. The sons of Ham: Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush: Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabteka. The sons of Ramah: Sheba and Dedan. Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on the earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land he went into Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calah, and Resen, between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. Egypt fathered Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtuhim, Haphrushim, Cashluhim, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtor. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hittites, the Arkites, the Sidonites, the Arvadites, the Zemarites, and the Hamathites. Afterward, the clans of the Canaanites dispersed, and the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon in the direction of Gerar, as far as Gaza, and in the direction of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zebulun, as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham, by their clans, their languages, their land, and their nations. To Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth, children were born. The sons of Shem: Elam, Ashur, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram: Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. To Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan fathered Almodad, Sheleph, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Diklah, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they lived extended from Mesha in the direction of Sephar to the hill country of the east. These are the sons of Shem, by their clans, their languages, their land, and their nations. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies, in their nations, and from these nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, as they settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had bricks, for stone, and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heaven, and let us make a name for ourselves, dispersed them over the face of all the earth. Now let's read Acts 2. It's on page 1096. 1096. Acts 2, verse 1 to 13. When the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And divided tongues as of fire appeared to them and rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now they were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. And at this sound the multitude came together, and they were bewildered, because each one was hearing them speak in his own language. And they were amazed and astonished, saying, "Are all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us in his own native language? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and parts of Libya, belonging to Cyrene, and visitors of France, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabians, we hear them telling in our own tongues the mighty word of God. And all were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others, mocking, said, "They are filled with new wine."
Great to be here this morning. My name's Josh. Now, in 2 seconds, I'm going to show you one of the significant attempts at world peace. Are you ready? La Hamaro Estas Dividita. Does anyone understand what I said? Now, it might be my accent, or it's the reason why we don't have a world peace. El Zanahoth looked at our world and he saw what we already know, that our world is divided. That people don't get on, we don't share freely, we don't work together on a global scale, that we're separated. Physically, socially, in every other kind of way. But surely, if we could all just get together, we could end things like hunger and war and all kinds of things if only we were united and not divided. And he reckoned the key to it all was that we can't talk to each other. And so he invented the language Esperanto, which was to be, he thought, the common language of the world. Unlike English, it was the perfect language where every word follows every rule. It's easy to learn. And his goal was that if everyone could learn Esperanto, could speak to each other, that would be the beginning of world peace. Now, does anyone know when Esperanto was invented? 1940s? 1887. Now, some significant, not world peace moments have happened since then. 2025, instead of world peace, Esperanto is just a nerdy kind of niche hobby that only a few people are into. I only know one person who's tried to learn it. Hopefully that doesn't offend you if that's you. Why is our world divided? Should we be involved in bringing unity to our world? Does it matter for Christians to try and bring it about? Does it matter to God? Am I free to go about my business and keep my life focused on what's within about 10 minutes of me, because that's what really matters? Or will God have me set my sights further afield? How are we to think about and engage with and live in our world? Genesis 10 and 11 get to the heart of these issues. answer. We don't need to, we can't, and there's nothing more important to give ourselves to. We don't really need to, we can't, and there is nothing more important to give our lives to. Let's see what Genesis 10 and 11 have to say. Point 1, humanity is united as we separate. Now remember the context, chapter 6, human evil and sin gets to such a point that God brought severe judgment. A flood wiped out all people from the face of the earth. It was devastating. God needs to reset button. And he starts again with just one family, the family of Noah. And then we get chapter 10. The longest of names, it is restarting and repopulating mankind. That's why we get the genealogy. Very well read. Now, not all genealogies are the same. We need to notice what different genealogies are trying to do. We get a few of them actually in Genesis 1 to 11. So what do we notice about the genealogy here in chapter 10? Well, the first is obvious, is that the repopulation project starts with Noah and his 3 sons. You can only get 3 sections in it that are structured around the line of each son. So you get Japheth, and then Ham, the cursed line, and then Shem, the blessed son, the line of promise. The second thing to notice is that there's no ages yet mentioned, unlike some of those other genealogies. It's not the focus how long people live or how old they were when they had kids. What is the focus? The third thing to notice is that not all of the names are names. Well, they're not all names of people. Some of them are names of nations and places and peoples. So you get Egypt and Cush and Sidon, and then the Amorites and the Hivites. You get places and nations. Because that this is the key focus when we look at how each section wraps up. Have a look at verse 5. From these the coastland people spread in their lands, each with his own language, by their clans in their nations. Verse 20. These are the sons of Ham by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. Verse 31. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. Genesis 10 is focused on telling us about the nations. How many nations? The fourth thing to notice is how many names and nations are listed. You want to guess? Quick maths. There's 70, which is a significant number. 7 times 10 is a significant and symbolic number that represents the whole world. This isn't a list of every single nation known at the time. There are nations that aren't on this list, but the point is it's a list that represents the nations of the world. And what we see them doing is spreading out across the world. Verse 32 kind of sums it up. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies in their nations, and from these the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. Why is that significant? Sorry, poets, if you're listening. People are fulfilling God's command from chapter 1 and 2. Fulfill and subdue the earth. You read it and you kind of look at God's reset seems to be working. People are doing what God told them to do. What's all this trying to tell us? Genesis 10. And one of the key things is that even as people spread out across the earth, and we have different lands, different languages, different nations, we're meant to see that they all come from the same origin. United, all part of the same family. Every person is from Noah and therefore Adam. When you look at the line of Ham's sons, there's a curse line too, a bunch of Israel's enemies are listed in there. And we're meant to see that even they come from the same origin as everyone else. So do we need to work towards unity in our world? Well, in one sense, and in a very deep and real sense, humanity is already united. People together, all starting from the same place. but there is one humanity. Together, under God, that we have more in common than we do different. It sounds obvious to say, but one implication is that there's no place for things like racism or other things that denigrate or subjugate other people's groups. We are equal under God, many nations, but united as one humanity. We don't need to create a unity from something that does not exist in any way already. In one sense, and in a very deep and real sense, humanity is united because of our origin. Humanity is united even as we separate out. But of course, as we look around, it's not a perfect unity, not a perfectly expressed unity. What in chapter 10 seems to be a godly spreading out to fill and subdue the earth, just as God had told them to do, we see in chapter 11 is actually separation and division because of God's judgment. Point 2. Humanity united against God, so we separate. Look at chapter 11, verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and some words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of China and settled there. Now, did anyone find that weird? I feel like I'll skip a bit. How does it go from chapter 10, verse 31, 32, that the people are spread out in nations, different languages, and then the next verse, there's one language and everyone is together? Chapter 11 isn't chronologically what happens kind of after you get to the end of chapter 10. This is actually the backstory to how all the nations got to where they are by the time of the end of chapter 10. We see the real cause for the spread of the nations. There was a time when humanity was united. And what did united humanity do? Well, we see they have three express aims. Look at verse 4. They want to build a tower with its top in the heavens. They want to make a name for themselves. And they want to avoid being dispersed on the earth. Humanity united together to defy their God. They combine their resources to make technology to express their sin. That's what's going on in verse 3 with the making of the bricks. And it's such a significant moment of sin that God brings judgment that changes the world forever, that we feel and live in the effects of today. The important question is, how is it sin? Because it doesn't really seem that bad, does it? Some people get together, they build the 7-point tower, judgment forever. Well, let's have a look at their three aims. To build a tower that's top in the heavens is, in effect, an effort to storm the throne room of God and rule his place, rule in his place. They want to make themselves like God and rule as if they are God. The great irony, of course, is that God already made them to be like him, in his image. He made them to rule, but not to take his place. They also want to make a name for themselves, to make a name before God, to build up their own reputation and honour. Yet it is God's name and honour that really made his word. They got it upside down. And last, and most obviously, they outright did not want to listen to or obey God. His command to fill and subdue the earth, they refuse. And they stay in one place. All this reminds us what we saw back in Genesis 3, that sin isn't an accident, it's not a mistake. Sin is willful rebellion against God. Doing what we want to do, making ourselves God rather than trusting in and obeying the true God. In the garden, Eve desired the fruit. She thought it would make her like God. They didn't trust in his word, and their hearts were exposed. And it turns out, hitting the reset button does not work. The same pattern continues. It does not fix sin. We try and press the reset button in our lives all the time, don't we? I promise God I won't do it again. I'm going to reset. I will be different from now on. How's that going for us? The reset doesn't work on a personal level. disaster in human history was outside Noah's boat, and yet the most deadly thing in that moment was still trapped inside. Sin in the heart of every person. Turn your computer on and off can solve pretty much anything, yet the reset cannot touch the human heart. Where every sinner is united, it can bind to storm and trouble. So what does God make of their tower, their efforts? Look at verse 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men had built. As tall and impressive as it seemed to mankind, it's as if God couldn't even see it from where he was. It's a great little bit of writing. God had to come down to see it. Attempting to take the place of God is, of course, completely ridiculous. In Western Australia in 1970, there was a man called Leonard Castley. He had a dispute with the government over his farm, and he declared that his farm was going to be its own micronation, separate from Australia, no longer under Australian law. Now imagine if his dispute got to the point where he declared war on Australia, this one guy on his farm. Could you imagine the full might of the Australian Army and Navy and Air Force combining their efforts to focus on him? It would be completely ridiculous and terrifying. Yet it's exactly what we do to God in our sin. We ignore. We start a puny rebellion against one who is infinitely more vast and powerful than us. What does God do in the face of this rebellion? Well, he decides they can no longer be united without hindrance. Humanity's capacity for evil is great, and it's multiplied when we can work together in unrestrained wickedness. God will do something about it. Verse 7. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. God confuses their language so they can't work together. It is so significant when you can't communicate. You can't understand. You can't trust. You can't work together. It naturally causes division and even hostility. And God disperses them over the face of the earth. God fulfills his purposes. Not because of human obedience, but in spite of it. Nothing can stop God's plans and purposes. Even when things are messy, even when things go wrong, even in the face of sin and people actively working to work against God's plans, not a single moment is outside of his complete and total control. If we were to one day find ourselves with the government actively opposing God, who said we'll do everything we can in our power to stop the spread of the gospel, we think what a terrible moment for the gospel and the spread of God's plans. How little do we know our God? There is no need to fear that his plan cannot be achieved. And yet the key implication of chapter 11 is that divisions are the judgment of God in humanity. The reason we're divided is because God has divided us. It's not just that we can't get on with each other. It's that God's judgment has made it this way. And it will continue to be this way as long as we still exist. One commentator said, as long as sin reigns, diversity among the nations is required to restrain the wickedness that a unified, simple humanity might achieve. We will never achieve perfect unity or world peace. The United Nations will never achieve its mission. The UN seeks to foster relations among nations, to work together to solve international problems, and primarily to maintain international peace. It will not succeed. In a world divided on account of God's judgment, it is an impossible task. knew when it didn't exist. But Genesis 11 says we need to be realistic about the impact that we make. It also says the vision is both an experience of judgment and an experience of grace. It is obviously the case that God's judgment in dividing us and fracturing us is actually just. And yet it's also an experience of grace. It is good that sinners can't pull their powers and resources together for evil combined together. And so it's good to seek peace and unity as far as possible. And yet sinking all our efforts into unity and world peace now is putting effort into something impossible to achieve. And so, should we just keep our world to the tenants around us? Should we be involved in bringing unity to our world? At one level, we don't need to. Because in a very real and deep way, we have unity with every person. Yet at the same time, we can't. Because bringing a real experience of unity to our world is impossible in a world that God has divided. And yet, before we let ourselves off the hook and think we can contain our lives from the airport to the beach, we need to see this isn't the end of the story, or the final effort of God's desire and plans. Humanity united in Christ. Even though God in his judgment has divided us, it is clear that his judgment is necessary for a time, but it is not his plan forever. Right from the beginning, God's plan has always been for people to spread out on the earth, to rule the world entirely under him, in different pockets, in different lands and different nations. His plan was always to bless the nations and bring blessing through the nations. We'll see that more next week. When Jesus turns up, he reaffirms God's commitment to the nations. When Jesus sends the disciples out to preach the good news of the kingdom, how many does he send? Does anyone know? The first time he sends 12, the number of the tribes of Israel, symbolizing he's come to bring in the people of God. And then the second time he sends out either 70 or 72, you might say it could be either, the same number as Genesis 10, symbolizing the whole world. Jesus sends people out to bring the good news to the nations. The good news that the King is here, that sin is defeated and everyone can be made right with God. God has dealt with the judgment of sin in the person of his Son. Not because we deserve it, precisely because we don't. The Bible shows us that all we do is contribute to the problem. But God has come down to bring a solution. And it is good news he wants to bring to the ends of the earth. And we get the great moment of Pentecost. We read the great reversal of Babel, that extraordinary moment where God's Spirit is poured out. And what does he do? Well, gather in Jerusalem are people from every nation under heaven. And the apostles start speaking. They speak in languages that every nation present can understand. The Acts 2:6. And at this sound, the multitude came together. They were bewildered, because each one was hearing them speak in his own language. The nations that had been divided come together and sit under the one good news of salvation and peace for the nations. God's plan of the nations is summed up in Ephesians chapter 1. That God has, a plan for the fullness of time to unite all things in him, Christ, things in heaven and things on earth. That is God's plan. He doesn't just tell us the plan, he shows us the picture of Revelation chapter 7, this magnificent future. After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hair, and crying out with a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. From the beginning to the end of Scripture, it is very clear God has a great heart for the nations, for every nation and people group, whom He made and loves and longs for, whom He divided for a time because of sin, but sent His Son to redeem and unite unto Him, that we might join in the greatest harmony ever heard of people from every language and nation, joining in praise of our glorious King. Should we be involved in the work of uniting our words? Can we contain the focus of our minds and our lives to the 10 minutes around us? So at one level, we don't need to try and create unity from nothing, we already have it. In a real and deep way, we come from the same place, made by the same God. At another level, we can't bring about the great unity we once had and we long for. God's judgment has divided us. And so we're realistic about how much unity we can achieve with this world. But at the deepest level, there is nothing more important or more vital, more an expression of God's heart, more an act of love, more central to bringing God the glory He deserves, than uniting the whole world, redeemed and united under Christ and working to that end. To see people from every language and nation bow the knee to their King and praise His name in the billion harmony. So we work hard with great joy to that end by prayerfully proclaiming the gospel. No Christian can go, as long as others care about the nations, that's good. I don't have to. God is concerned, and we're concerned about His world. To be a Christian is to be a follower of Christ, to love what He loves, and be moved by what moves Him. What does He love? He loves leaving the 99 to find the one. To see those who are far off welcomed into His Father's arms, just like we have. I know about you, my unity is often righteous. And we get involved in seeing the nations united under Christ. There is peace. And the key is it takes an ordinary Christian. And God promises to do extraordinary things. One of the key ways Jesus says the harvest is plentiful, but the labourers are few, therefore, unexpectedly, he says we should pray. And very expectedly. Pray to the Lord of the harvest. No one will know if we do or don't pray, but God says He will change the world if we do. His name prayer. We can be involved by reading and praying to the Lord of the harvest. We can be involved by partnering with those who've gone out to the world. Someone told me earlier this year that they regularly schedule a prayer for mission partners they know and said, just after they do it, they send a 1-minute email. Say, how are you going? I've been praying for you. What's been happening? It's a great way to pray for the nations and partner with their mission partners. We can also give. We have the incredible privilege of using the finite resources God has given us, things we can't take with us, to have an effect on eternity. We can be involved in mission to the nations that God is bringing to our backyard. God is bringing the nations to us. There's a guy called Batu who moved to Australia from Turkey at the start of this year. He started coming to church up at Wild Street. He heard very ordinary people preach the gospel. He talked to the very ordinary people up at Wild Street every week. He sat in a very ordinary, nice, but very ordinary hall at St. Mark's and opened the Bible at life. And he was compelled by the good news of his Saviour. And he came to church at Easter. He came up after Easter and said, I want to become a Christian today. There is nothing better. We can be involved in that all the time. People have become Christians in Australia regularly. And we can be involved in God's plan for the nations by going to the nations. Considering whether we might go and be for someone else what the most important person in our life was to us. The person who We just had 13 people from church, Lottery and St. Matt's get together last week to think about all they could do. Someone who was sent out to do that harvest work that we do. So we need to do and go there, wherever there is. It's incredibly important. What part might we play in seeing all nations united under Christ, joining in praise and worship? It's not an optional it's not an optional extra just for the super Christians. It is central to God's heart. As Michael Jason, he said this: we have an opportunity and responsibility to participate in a work of cosmic proportions, one that God has been developing since creation and that will climax in the global praise of Christ and the immeasurable joy of the redeemed of the new earth. We can join in God's passion to see the broken-hearted find healing, the enslaved set free, the grieving find hope, and the hurting find help. We must either go or stand. We must either be a rope holder or one who crosses cultures for the sake of the name. And we enjoy the greatest power for the highest task. Esperanto was a great attempt to unite our world, but it misdiagnosed the issue. Firstly, it misunderstood that we don't need to create unity out of nothing. We have a bigger unity than we realize already. It was right in diagnosing that our experience of disunity and division is deep in this world. But we're not divided because we can't communicate. We're divided and we can't communicate because of God's judgment on sin. Creating a new perfect language was never going to overcome God's judgment on this world. But it has been overcome in the death and resurrection of His Son. And so we don't put all our eggs in the basket of bringing unity and world peace in this world, but we use everything that God has put in the basket of our life to see the whole world reconciled to and united under Christ. Never be separated or cast out from Him.